Elizabeth Taylor called Michael Jackson at 2 in the morning and said one thing. Michael didn't speak for a long time after she said it. Then he picked up a pen and wrote down a date. The year was 1996. The History World Tour had been in motion for 6 months. 82 shows across 4 continents. 4 million tickets sold. The largest production budget of any concert tour in history up to that point. Michael Jackson was 38 years old, and by almost any measure, he was at the peak of his power as a live performer. And yet, on a Tuesday night in October, alone in a hotel room in Prague, he had made a decision that would have ended the European leg of the tour entirely. The decision was made. The call to his management team had already been placed. And then the phone rang. It was 2 in the morning. The name on the display was one he recognized immediately. He stared at it for a moment. Then he picked up. To understand why that call mattered the way it did, you have to understand what Elizabeth Taylor was to Michael Jackson. They had met in 1984 at a private dinner following the Victory Tour. He was 25, she was 52, and by every account from everyone who witnessed their friendship, they recognized something in each other almost immediately. Both of them had been child performers. Both had grown up inside an industry that consumed everything personal and gave back only visibility. Both had spent their entire lives being watched, scrutinized, celebrated, reduced, and mythologized by people who had never met them and never would. Elizabeth Taylor understood the particular loneliness of that experience in a way that almost no one else alive could. She had said publicly, more than once, that Michael was the least judged person in her life, and that she was the least judged person in his. They spoke on the phone regularly, not about the industry, not about their careers, about ordinary things, about what it felt like to want silence, about the difficulty of trusting anyone who had approached you first. Michael called her his closest friend, and in 1996, that friendship was about to matter more than he could have anticipated. The History World Tour was not just a concert tour. It was a statement. The History album, released in June 1995, had arrived in the middle of the most difficult period of Michael Jackson's public life. The allegations of 1993 had never been resolved in a courtroom. They had been settled out of court, which the press had interpreted in every direction simultaneously. Michael had married Lisa Marie Presley in May 1994. The marriage had ended 18 months later. And through all of it, the press had followed every development with an intensity that had no precedent in the history of celebrity journalism. Michael had responded the only way he knew how. He had worked. The History album was 32 tracks. It was a double album. It was the most personal thing he had ever released, and the most defended. Every song was a statement. Every performance was armor. But armor, worn long enough, becomes its own kind of weight. And by October of 1996, in a hotel room in Prague, that weight had become something Michael Jackson could no longer carry alone. The specific night did not begin with a single event. It began with a call from his management team in the early evening. A call about the European press coverage that had been building for the past 2 weeks. 3 major newspapers had run coordinated pieces questioning his mental and physical fitness to continue the tour. The stories cited unnamed sources. They described private moments that had been observed and reported without consent. Michael read them in the hotel room after the call ended. He read them carefully, which was always a mistake, and he knew it was always a mistake, and he read them anyway. He sat with the papers on the floor around him for a long time. Then he made the decision. He called his tour manager and said he needed to speak with him first thing in the morning. He didn't say why. He didn't need to. The tone of his voice was enough. He sat by the window for the next 2 hours and watched the lights of the city below him. He had done this before, sat with a decision in the dark until it stopped feeling like a decision and started feeling like a fact. By midnight, it felt like a fact. And then at 2 a.m, the phone rang. He looked at the name on the display. Elizabeth. He picked up on the second ring. Elizabeth Taylor's voice was immediately recognizable, unhurried, precise, the kind of voice that had learned decades ago that it never needed to compete with a room. She asked him how he was. He told her the truth. He told her he was tired. He told her he was done. She didn't argue with him. She didn't tell him he was wrong. Elizabeth Taylor had known Michael Jackson for 12 years. She understood that the one approach that would guarantee the opposite of what you wanted was to challenge his decision directly. So she didn't. Instead, she talked. She talked for a while about something that had nothing to do with the tour, or the press coverage, or the European dates, or any of it. She talked about the first time she had wanted to quit. Not performing, not acting, being visible at all. She told him about a night, years earlier, in a hotel room not unlike the one he was sitting in, when she had looked at everything being said about her and decided it wasn't worth it. And she told him what had changed her mind. What Elizabeth Taylor told Michael Jackson in the next few minutes was not advice. She was careful about that distinction. She knew he had no shortage of people offering him advice. What she offered him was something different. She told him about the audience. Not as an abstraction, not as ticket sales or demographics or market data. She told him about the specific people she had seen in her own career, the ones who came not because of the spectacle, but because something in what she did had given them permission to feel something they hadn't been able to feel anywhere else. She told him she had learned, over many decades, that the performer and the audience make a kind of agreement, that the agreement goes beyond the ticket and the stage, that breaking it, really breaking it by walking away when the pressure becomes too much, leaves something unfinished in both directions. And then she said the one thing. She said, "They came because only you can do what you do, and right now, somewhere in Europe, someone is counting on that being true." Michael didn't respond immediately. The line was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table, and he picked up the pen. He wrote down the date of the next show. Not the full schedule, not the entire European leg, just the next date. October 25th, Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Arena. He looked at it for a moment. Then he called his tour manager back and told him the morning meeting was no longer necessary. The European leg would continue. He did not explain why. He did not mention the phone call. He simply said, "We go." What happened in Amsterdam 3 days later was something that everyone who was present would describe as one of the great performances of Michael Jackson's career. 50,000 people, a 2.5-hour show with no pauses, no interruptions, no concessions to the exhaustion that everyone backstage knew he was carrying. Journalists who had written the pieces that triggered the hotel room crisis were in the press section that night. Several of them revised their coverage in the days that followed. But what almost no one watching from outside understood was that the person who had made that night possible was not in the arena. She was in Los Angeles, waiting to hear how it had gone. The European leg of the History Tour ran through October and November of 1996 and returned in the summer of 1997. 35 shows across 18 countries. Germany, France, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Italy, Spain. Michael Jackson performed to more than 2 million people on that leg alone. He performed through weather delays, equipment failures, and the kind of sustained pressure that would have stopped most performers weeks earlier. He did not cancel a single date. People who worked the tour in those months described a version of Michael that was different from what they had seen before. More deliberate, more present. As if he had arrived at each show having already made peace with whatever it was going to cost him. One of his production managers said later that, in all his years in the industry, he had never seen a performer who appeared less interested in the reviews and more interested in the audience itself. He would stand at the side of the stage before each show and watch the crowd fill in. Not the spectacle of it, the people. One by one, the way Elizabeth Taylor had described them. Elizabeth Taylor and Michael Jackson remained close for the rest of his life. She was present at significant moments, some public, many private, in the years that followed the History Tour. When asked about their friendship in interviews, she was consistent in what she said. She said that Michael Jackson was one of the most misunderstood people she had ever known, and that misunderstanding, she believed, was the price of existing at a scale that most people could not imagine, and therefore could not accurately observe. She said he was funny. She said he was curious about everything. She said he was kinder in private than any public account had ever captured. When Michael Jackson died in June 2009, Elizabeth Taylor did not give interviews. She released a statement. It was 4 sentences long. She said, "My heart, my mind, and my soul are shattered. I have lost my closest friend, my deepest love, my joy." She died 2 years later, in March 2011. In her personal papers, which her estate made partially available, there were letters, handwritten, on plain paper, undated. Many of them were from Michael. None of them were about the industry. There is a question that follows this story wherever it goes. What would have happened if Michael Jackson had not picked up that call? If he had let it ring, as he had let so many other things ring during that period of his life? 2 million people across 18 European countries would not have seen what they saw. 35 shows would have ended before they began, and the date written on that piece of paper, October 25th, Amsterdam, would never have existed. What Elizabeth Taylor gave Michael Jackson on that phone call was not advice about the tour. It was a reminder of something he already knew but could no longer feel from inside that hotel room. That the work was not about surviving the scrutiny. It was about the agreement he had made with the people in the seats, and that some agreements are worth keeping even when everything around them has become difficult to bear. Michael Jackson kept that agreement. For 2 million people, on 35 nights across Europe, he kept it. Because a woman called him at 2 in the morning and said one thing, and he picked up the pen. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to this channel. Every week we bring you the moments behind the music that history almost forgot. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the hardest decisions are sometimes made in the quietest rooms. And leave a comment. Has someone ever said one thing that changed a decision you had already made? Michael Jackson's story is about more than music. It is about what it means to keep a promise when keeping it costs everything.